It's hard to believe, but it is now the middle of September. It's been a month, so that means it's time for another garden tour and update. Let's take a look at what's growing and not in my garden. There's actually quite a lot still growing in here, so I'm just gonna show you the highlights and maybe a couple of the lowlights. My red Edgewarsky sweet peppers are doing great this year. They're so delicious. The ones that are higher up are doing better. The bugs are still getting the ones on the bottom, but still, there's a lot growing. With okra, every time I harvest a pod, I also clip off the leaf that goes with it. So by this time of summer, they end up with really long stalks. But they still keep growing. Here's one of the flowers. So pretty. This is my bed of sweet potatoes. You can see the purple flowers. Really pretty. I just decided to let these guys go wild. We'll see what I get at the end of summer. My rows of acorn squash, butternut squash, and cantaloupe and watermelon, these two rows, are done. But they're clearly not done because what has taken over are the passion fruits, the maypops. These are vining perennials, the Tennessee native wildflower, in fact. They go crazy and they produce really delicious fruit. Maypops are pretty easy to figure out when to harvest because they just drop to the ground. And so now I am starting to harvest buckets of these things. We're gonna make jelly out of it, hopefully. They taste delicious. This is my row of Seminole pumpkins, which has spilled out to become a whole patch of Seminole pumpkins. And I think some butternut squash are in here too. I love these guys. These are great late summer producers. They flower later than a lot of the other winter squashes. My Chinese red noodle yard-long beans are still producing great. Today's a harvest day for this stuff too. This is the area of my garden that I am currently most excited about and spending a lot of time in. It's harvest time for my winter squashes, and that is what I've been busy doing for the last week or so. You can see that the vines are starting to die off. Some of them already have, and this is normal for the end of the growing season for winter squash. Once their vegetables, fruits have grown, the vines die off and the skins harden, and then it's time to go searching and harvesting all the fun things that you couldn't see when the leaves were so thick. These are Jaharadale pumpkins. I'm so happy with these this year. They turn sort of a blue-gray green when they are ready to harvest, like this guy is. I'm seeing a lot of squash bug activity now. Eggs and some of the ones that I've missed the eggs. So it's definitely time to get these up because they'll do damage to the skins. Look at this guy. This is a giant blue Hubbard squash. I think I'll be harvesting him today. These vines, if you give them room to grow, they will take it. Here's a fun one. This is a Georgia candy roaster. I've never eaten these before. They say they have a mild squash flavor. And I think this one's coming in maybe in the next day or two. Up here is where I had the small sugar pumpkin patch. These are the vines that went first, that started dying off first. So I've been harvesting a lot of little sugar pumpkins. You can see I've still got some stragglers here. Here's what I harvested so far this morning. And wait till you see what I show you that I've already harvested over the past week. Here are some more Seminole pumpkins. I love the ones that hang up on the trellis because they stay nice and clean. This year is definitely a good winter squash year. I harvested most of my spaghetti squash already, but there are a few here left on the vine on this trellis hanging up, so they're pretty safe from the bugs, and I'm kind of leaving these on till they get fully ripe and the vine and the stem starts to turn brown more. These guys are safe, so we'll let them do that on the vine. This guy popped up on its own. I think it's an elderberry plant. I'm gonna leave it. Maybe I'll just leave one here in the garden. It seems to want to grow here. More maypops. There's my popcorn. I still haven't harvested it. There it is. Popcorn. Now look at this. These are my Jerusalem artichokes, and they are starting to flower. Even though they all fell over, they seem to be all right. A couple of them died, but most of them are all right. These are pretty. They look like daisy flowers to me more than sunflowers. Speaking of yellow flowers, look at this wall over here. This is one area that I have my loofah planted, and this is why I've been talking about how I love them so much. These yellow flowers were now the middle of September, and they are going strong. If you've never seen loofah gourds before, this is what they look like when they're still immature. They're green, and then eventually they'll dry out on the vine and turn brown, and then you can harvest them and use them as loofah sponges. Here's one that's turning brown. It's not quite done yet, but that gives you the idea. Once it gets totally brown and dry is when I will pick it. These are my cherry tomatoes. They're not looking so good anymore. However, there's still a bunch of tomatoes that I'll be harvesting today, and there will be some stragglers over the next few weeks. Now that the weather's cooling off, if the plant survives, it may actually start producing a few more end of the season ones. So I'm gonna leave the plants and just see what happens. Well, this is a nice surprise. Look, I got another little yellow summer squash starting up. This is another row that looks to be kind of out of control. However, I'm just letting it go. This is my row of peanut plants, and these guys are really spreading out. I'm kind of curious to see what happens. I've mentioned before how peanuts actually produce peanuts. Let's see if I can show you something. Oh, yeah, okay. So all of those little yellow flowers from early in the summer, if they get pollinated, they put out these things called peduncles. They're just these little sticks, see? And these little sticks have to go down into the ground, and where they're underground, that's where a peanut would form. So that's why the plants kind of fall over and get heavy, because they need to touch the ground. You're supposed to also add soil around to give them a helping hand, which I did not do. But I don't know, we'll see what happens this year. Here's what happens if you let your plants go to seed and then you get far behind on your weeding. Sometimes those seeds just come up as volunteer plants. And look, I have a couple of radishes. I also have a few volunteer potato plants. This was my row of potatoes that I harvested back in, I don't know what, June maybe? And I left some little potatoes in the ground, and some of them actually sprouted and are hopefully going to give me a very small, but heck, why not, fall potato crop. These were all volunteer bean plants because I let my bush beans go to seed, and some of them dropped and produced their own plants. However, the Mexican bean beetles have really just decimated them, so I don't think, let's see, look at here they are. I don't think I'm going to get any beans potentially out of these because I just don't have the time to go try saving them. So I have a feeling these are all lost, but oh well. It was kind of fun to see them come up on their own. Here are my tromboncino squash plants. You can see once they're turning orange like this, they become nice winter squashes. They're like a mild butternut squash. They're delicious. I really enjoy them when they're green and immature like this, because then I just peel them and eat them raw. Here is a latecomer to my garden. This is Malabar spinach. The weeds sort of took over, and so it was a while before I freed them, but they're really taking off now. You see this? All of these little green leaves are edible. And this is a very heat tolerant plant, so it grows all through summer, where regular spinach, you know, dies off very, very early on. It's a cool season. This is actually not spinach, but they call it Malabar spinach. And you can treat it like spinach. Eat it raw, steam it, cook it, saute it. Here are some volunteer daikon radish. You can see I didn't plant these. They just went to seed on their own. Let's see here. There they are. See? It's a little white daikon radish. Here's another yard-long bean that I'm growing this year for the first time. These are python beans, and these are great. I'm going to save some seeds so I can plant a few more next year and fill out the trellis a little bit more. Here's my main patch of loofah. Look at this. Come on, how does this not just make you smile? These are my red bell pepper plants. They're doing pretty well this year. They were off to a slow start, but now they've started producing. Have you ever seen a tobacco hornworm? Here you go. And this is what they do. They munch off everything. I'm heading up to show you one more thing, but I figure I should mention this is my wood chip mountain. I've got my work cut out for me. I need to move these down into the garden. When I said this was a good winter squash harvest year, I wasn't kidding. This is what I've been up to the last week or so. Harvesting butternut squash, spaghetti squash, acorn squash, sugar pumpkins, Jaharadale pumpkins, candy roasters, and tromboncino. That's a lot of squash. And that's not all. This is my holding place where when I first harvest, I put them out here. I wash them off with vinegar to try and minimize the bacteria that might be on there, and that might help degrade it. And when I'm confident that they're keepers, they will make it onto the shelves. I'm gonna need to get some more shelves. That'll do it for this month's garden tour. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy our videos, we'd really appreciate it if you would take a second and subscribe to our channel. Thanks. And until next time, like our farm sign says, just keep growing.